Vinayak Damodar Savarkar remains one of the greatest enigmas in Indian history. Was he a courageous freedom fighter, or merely a man who surrendered before the British? That question remains deeply contested even today. What makes his story particularly fascinating is the question of how a committed atheist became one of the principal architects of Hindutva ideology. Those who simply condemn Savarkar often overlook the complexities of his personality and political journey. Another interpretation presents him not merely as a religious extremist, but as a political thinker who sought to organize Hindu society as a unified political community. The severe hardships he endured during his solitary confinement in the Cellular jail must also be considered when examining the decisions and positions he took later in life. Those who dismiss his Mercy Petitions with insulting labels often overlook a broader historical reality. During the struggle against British rule, national leaders, including Mahatma Gandhi, also engaged in negotiations, compromises, and strategic interventions at different stages. At the same time, the extent to which Savarkar's ideas influenced the ideological development of M.S. Golwalkar and the RSS must be examined objectively. A person's entire life cannot be dismissed solely on the basis of a few letters or political positions. Every individual who participated in the freedom struggle should be assessed through both their contributions and their limitations. So rather than blindly praising or condemning Savarkar, let us examine who he really was through evidence, records, and historical context. Let us now enter the complex journey of his life. This story begins on May 28, 1883, in the small village of Bhagur, near Nashik, in Maharashtra. Savarkar was born into an educated and orthodox Chitpavan Brahmin family. His father, Damodar Pant Savarkar, was an influential figure in the village, while his mother, Radhabai, raised him within a strong framework of cultural values. Even as a child, Savarkar displayed an exceptional intellectual ability. He was not an ordinary child. He developed a deep fascination with literature and the heroic history of India. His imagination was shaped by epics such as the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, while the heroic stories of Chhatrapati Shivaji and Maharana Pratap stirred his young mind. Yet the person who influenced his thinking and national consciousness most deeply was his elder brother, Ganesh Damodar Savarkar, better known as Baburao. But Savarkar's childhood did not last long. In 1892, when he was only 9 years old, he lost his mother. Before he had recovered from that loss, he lost his father in 1899. Savarkar encountered the hardships of life at an exceptionally young age. Maharashtra itself was far from peaceful during those years. He grew up amid repeated Hindu-Muslim tensions and communal disturbances. Savarkar later recorded that news of the Hindu-Muslim clashes in Yola in 1894 had deeply affected him during his childhood. These experiences remained somewhere in his subconscious, and years later became part of the background through which he explained the development of his Hindu nationalist ideas. In many ways, the turbulent environment in which Savarkar grew up became one of the forces that shaped his worldview. Savarkar's emergence as a revolutionary did not happen overnight. In 1897, a major incident shook Maharashtra when the Chapakar brothers assassinated a British official. The news filled the young Savarkar with revolutionary passion. While still a teenager, he later recalled taking an oath before his family deity, Ashtabhuja Bhavani, to pursue an armed revolution for India's independence. This was more than an emotional declaration. On January 24, 1902, he joined Fergusson College in Pune for higher education, and his political ideas became increasingly sharper there. Around 1899 and 1900, during his college years, Savarkar and his brother established a secret organization called Mitra Mela. Although the name suggested a simple gathering of friends, its objective was far more radical. The organization aimed to prepare Indian youth for an armed revolution against British rule. Savarkar wrote poems, published articles, and delivered passionate speeches to inspire patriotism among students. The political ideas of Bal Gangadhar Tilak, particularly his uncompromising spirit of resistance, had a powerful influence on him. In 1904, Savarkar reorganized Mitra Mela by bringing together representatives from different groups and renamed it Abhinav Bharat, or the Young India Society. The name was inspired by Giuseppe Mazzini's revolutionary organization Young Italy. When the Swadeshi movement reached its peak in 1905, Savarkar refused to remain a passive observer. As part of the boycott of foreign goods, he gathered foreign clothes in the center of Pune and set them on fire. With that, the young Savarkar began his political journey through an uncompromising campaign against British rule. In 1906, Savarkar traveled to London on a scholarship from Shyamji Krishna Varma to study law. But education was not his only purpose. Centered around India House in London, he began laying the foundations for a wider revolutionary movement. Rather than limiting himself to the life of a student, he established close connections with prominent revolutionaries such as Madam Bikaji Kama and Lala Har Dayal. To coordinate Indian students in London, he established an organization known as the Free India Society. Savarkar had effectively taken his revolutionary campaign into the heart of the British Empire itself. During this period, another important historical controversy concerning him also emerged. Some historians have suggested that Savarkar played a role in the design of an early Indian national flag that Madame Kama presented in Stuttgart, Germany, in 1907. However, there remain differing opinions about the precise extent of his involvement. Then, in 1909, a book that would become one of the most influential works of his early career was published, The Indian War of Independence of 1857. Savarkar challenged the British description of the 1857 uprising as merely a sepoy mutiny and presented it instead as a national war of independence. The British government banned the book, but copies continued to circulate secretly. Historical records indicate that the work influenced several revolutionaries and nationalists who came later. Savarkar was not merely spreading revolutionary ideas. Madan Lal Dhingra, who was connected to the Revolutionary Network in London, assassinated British official Curzon Wyllie in London in 1909. After this assassination, British authorities began paying much closer attention to Savarkar and his activities. The assassination in London shocked the British authorities. Matters became even more serious when one of the Browning pistols that Savarkar had secretly sent from London to India was recorded as having been used in the assassination of Nashik collector A.M.T. Jackson in 1909. Soon afterward, following the Nashik conspiracy case, Savarkar was arrested in London on March 13, 1910. He faced charges including incitement to wage war against the British government and conspiracy under sections 121 and 121A of the Indian Penal Code. The British decided to transport him to India aboard the ship SS Moria for trial. But during the journey, a dramatic event unfolded. On July 8, 1910, when the ship anchored at the port of Marseilles in France, Savarkar made a desperate attempt to escape. He passed through the narrow window of the ship's toilet, evaded the guards, and jumped into the sea. He managed to swim to the French shore, but his escape did not last long. French police captured him and handed him back to the British authorities. The incident created an international controversy. The dispute surrounding his recapture was eventually considered by the Permanent Court of Arbitration at The Hague, which issued its final award on February 24, 1911. Meanwhile, Savarkar was brought to India, where the cases against him continued in Bombay. Following his trial in 1911, he was sentenced to 2 life imprisonments, amounting to 50 years of rigorous imprisonment. On July 4, 1911, the 28-year-old Savarkar arrived at the notorious Cellular jail in the Andaman Islands. The Cellular jail was, in every sense, a terrifying place. With approximately 698 solitary confinement cells, the prison was designed to isolate prisoners, and even communication between inmates was strictly restricted. During the early years of his imprisonment, Savarkar endured severe solitary confinement and other harsh restrictions. What must have passed through the mind of a man subjected to such extreme physical and psychological suffering? Prisoners were assigned exhausting manual labor, and Savarkar was not exempt. In his own memoirs, he recorded that he was expected to extract approximately 30 pounds of oil each day through grueling work at the oil mill. The prisoners also raised serious complaints about the quality of their food and water. Those who failed to complete their work or violated prison regulations could face severe physical punishment. The terrible food and harsh conditions caused many prisoners to become seriously ill, and some died. Yet these conditions did not completely destroy Savarkar's determination. He was not provided with paper or a pen, but he found another way to preserve his writing. Using stones and nails, he composed poems on the walls of the prison. According to his own memoirs, he memorized around 6,000 lines so that his work would not be lost. He also participated in hunger strikes with other prisoners to protest the brutal conditions inside the jail. Savarkar further recorded that some prison wardens attempted to forcibly convert Hindu prisoners, and he raised his voice against what he regarded as such injustices. He spent nearly a decade under these harsh conditions before the British finally agreed to transfer him to a mainland prison in 1921. It was during this period that one of the most controversial chapters of Savarkar's life emerged, the Mercy Petitions. Between 1911 and 1920, while imprisoned in the Andaman Islands, Savarkar submitted several petitions to the British government. In these petitions, he expressed loyalty to the British government and indicated a willingness to support administrative reforms. These documents remain one of the strongest points of criticism against him. In a petition from 1918, Savarkar also made an emotional statement saying that he was prepared to give up his own release if other political prisoners could be granted freedom. Nevertheless, because of the conciliatory language used in these petitions, later critics portrayed him as a coward and as someone who had submitted himself to British authority. His supporters, however, interpret the same documents very differently. They argue that the petitions were a calculated political strategy to escape the prison system, survive the ordeal, and eventually return to political activity. From this perspective, the petitions represented a tactical attempt to secure a political exit from imprisonment. The phrase, "your obedient servant," at the end of the petitions has also attracted considerable criticism. Yet such formal language was part of the official correspondence of that period. The deeper controversy lies in the political language used in the petitions and the arguments Savarkar presented in seeking accommodation with the British government. The Mercy Petitions, therefore, remain one of the most disputed aspects of his life. Dismissing them with a derogatory insult oversimplifies the history, while portraying them entirely as brilliant statesmanship also removes an important part of the controversy. The reality is more complicated. There is, however, another fascinating part of this story. In 1920, years after Savarkar had submitted his early petitions, Mahatma Gandhi wrote in Young India calling for the release of the Savarkar brothers. Gandhi had, at that time, spoken publicly in support of Savarkar's release. It is important to remember that this intervention came years after Savarkar's initial petitions. After 1919, several political prisoners in India received release or reductions in their sentences, but the British government did not immediately release Savarkar. Finally, on January 6, 1924, he was released under strict conditions. He was prohibited from participating in politics for 5 years and was not permitted to leave Ratnagiri district. During this restricted period, he also received a government allowance of 60 rupees per month. The nature and meaning of this allowance have been interpreted differently by different observers, with some viewing it as financial assistance provided by the government during his restricted life. Even after his release, Savarkar did not simply withdraw from public life. Some biographers strongly argue that he maintained secret connections with revolutionary circles. It is easy to criticize decisions from a distance, but understanding the conditions under which those decisions were made requires an examination of the suffering he endured in prison. Another major event that influenced Savarkar's political thinking was the Malabar Rebellion of 1921. Mahatma Gandhi had strongly supported the Caliphate movement, which sought to defend the position of the Caliph in Turkey. The events that followed in Malabar would deeply affect Savarkar's political outlook. A rebellion subsequently erupted in Malabar, Kerala. Its origins were complex, involving opposition to British rule, agrarian conflicts between tenants and landlords, and the political mobilization associated with the Caliphate movement. In later stages of the rebellion, severe communal violence occurred, including killings of Hindus, forced conversions, and attacks on temples. These reports deeply disturbed Savarkar. He increasingly came to believe that Gandhi's policy of non-violence left Hindu society vulnerable in the face of organized violence. Against this background, his concerns about the internal security of Hindus and the need for their military strengthening became increasingly intense. In 1924, he published a novel titled Mapla, which represented his deeply emotional and political response to the rebellion. It was not a work of neutral historical research, but rather a literary expression of his interpretation of those events. However, it would be historically inaccurate to claim that the Malabar Rebellion alone transformed Savarkar into a radical Hindutva advocate overnight. His ideological development had taken place gradually over many years. In 1923, he had already written Hindutva, Who is a Hindu?, a work that later became one of the foundational texts of Hindu nationalism. For Savarkar, the word Hindu represented more than a religious identity. He presented it as a cultural, historical, and national identity. That concept became the foundation of his political philosophy. In Hindutva, Who is a Hindu?, Savarkar defined Hindus as those who regarded the land extending from the Indus River to the Indian Ocean as both their fatherland and holy land. Within this cultural and national definition, he included Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, and Sikh traditions that regarded India as both their ancestral homeland and sacred land. But this was also where Savarkar made a fundamental distinction. Because the principal holy lands of Islam and Christianity lay outside India, he regarded their followers as distinct from the core national community defined by Hindutva. At the same time, he strongly argued that Hindus needed to organize themselves culturally and militarily. At the 1937 Ahmedabad session of the Hindu Mahasabha, Savarkar openly declared that Hindus and Muslims constituted two distinct national communities. Yet he strongly opposed dividing India on that basis to create Pakistan. His vision was instead an undivided Indian nation in which Hindus, as the majority, would hold political dominance. In some speeches and political statements, he also stated that the individual and cultural rights of minorities should be protected, and that no community should receive special political appeasement. Savarkar's Hindutva therefore combined an attempt to consolidate Hindus as a national community with a clear majoritarian political perspective. Another accusation that has followed him throughout history is that he was a fascist. It is true that in some of his writings and speeches during the 1930s and 1940s, Savarkar made favorable references to the strong national organization and military power of Germany and Italy. Some historians interpret these statements as evidence of sympathy toward European fascist models. Other historians interpret those references differently, arguing that Savarkar was observing European political developments and considering what a colonized country, like India, might learn from them. Therefore, rather than simply placing a complete fascist label on Savarkar, it is more historically responsible to examine his statements within the political context of the period. Savarkar's theory of Hindutva did share significant ideological connections with the Hindu nationalist ideas that later developed within the RSS. But contrary to a common misconception, Savarkar was not the founder of the RSS. The organization was established in 1925 by Dr. K. B. Hedgewar. Hedgewar maintained a close relationship with Savarkar and visited him in Ratnagiri. Later, the Hindu nationalist ideas of M.S. Golwalkar, who became a major leader of the RSS, showed significant similarities with Savarkar's Hindutva. However, it would be historically inaccurate to claim that all of Golwalkar's ideas originated from Savarkar. The RSS focused primarily on cultural and organizational work, while Savarkar placed greater emphasis on direct political and electoral activity. Savarkar's political opposition was also directed strongly against communist ideology. He argued that communist internationalism and class-based politics could threaten India's national unity. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, the Communist Party of India, which had previously opposed the war, changed its position and supported the Allied war effort while opposing the Quit India movement of 1942. This position provided further ground for Savarkar's criticism of communist politics. Savarkar's strong opposition to communism later became an important part of the political position of the Hindu Mahasabha. At the same time, it is important to recognize that the Indian communist movement itself changed its positions according to the international circumstances of the 1940s, and those developments cannot be understood only through Savarkar's criticism. Now we come to another striking aspect of Savarkar's personal life. During the years when he was restricted from political activity, he became deeply involved in social reform in Maharashtra. Surprisingly, the man widely regarded as one of the principal theorists of radical Hindutva was also a committed rationalist and atheist in his personal outlook. He strongly opposed blind belief in religious texts and encouraged people to approach social questions through reason and scientific thinking. He even sharply criticized the practice of treating the cow as a sacred object. His position was that the cow was an animal, and that protecting it could be justified as a social responsibility because of its practical usefulness to human society. Savarkar also fought strongly against caste discrimination and untouchability, which he believed were weakening Hindu society from within. In 1931, he established the Padit Pavan Temple in Ratnagiri, where people from different castes were allowed to enter. The temple also rejected the idea that a priest had to be born into the Brahmin caste. According to its rules, any Hindu who knew the required rituals could serve as a priest. Savarkar also promoted Sahabhojan, where people from different castes sat together and shared meals. He publicly called for the removal of several social restrictions, including untouchability, restrictions on inter-caste marriage, and restrictions on crossing the seas. Savarkar did not consider Hindutva to be identical with Brahmanism. Rather than defining it exclusively through Brahmin dominance, he presented Hindutva as a political and cultural framework intended to unite different Hindu caste communities. He also made contributions to language, introducing and promoting new terms in an effort to reform Hindi and Marathi vocabulary. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who lived during the same period, approached the caste question differently. Ambedkar subjected the structure of caste to a much deeper social and political critique and eventually chose religious conversion as a way of leaving the Hindu social order. Savarkar, by contrast, sought reform through reorganization from within Hindu society. Both sought social change, but their methods and philosophical paths were different. This complicated relationship between rationalism, social reform, and Hindu identity makes Savarkar's personality particularly difficult to classify. After his political restrictions were lifted in 1937, Savarkar returned to active politics and became president of the All India Hindu Mahasabha. It was during this period that another major contradiction emerged. Under the political leadership of the Hindu Mahasabha, coalition governments involving the Muslim League were formed in Bengal, Sindh, and the Northwest Frontier Province. Savarkar's willingness to participate in political alliances based on circumstances attracted significant criticism. The nature of these alliances also differed from province to province. When the Second World War began, the Congress strongly opposed Britain's decision to involve India in the war without sufficient political agreement with Indian leaders and demanded a commitment to complete independence. Savarkar took a different position. He called upon Hindus to join the British Armed Forces and acquire modern military training. His broader objective was to strengthen Hindu society through military organization. Savarkar and the leadership of the Hindu Mahasabha did not support the Congress's Quit India movement of 1942. He instructed members of the Hindu Mahasabha not to resign from government positions or local boards in order to join the movement. Some historians argue that, while Congress leaders were imprisoned, Savarkar sought to preserve his organization's political influence and gain strategic advantage. It is also true that Savarkar met Subhas Chandra Bose during this period. However, although some of Savarkar's supporters later claimed that he advised Bose to leave India and establish the Indian National Army, there's no clear historical evidence establishing that claim. Bose had his own independent military strategy. The ideological conflict between Savarkar and Gandhi had by then become very clear. Gandhi consistently emphasized nonviolence and Hindu-Muslim unity, while Savarkar placed greater emphasis on military strength and Hindu nationalism. Although they eventually became fierce political opponents, Gandhi had himself intervened in 1920 in support of the release of the Savarkar brothers. This contradiction reveals how complex their relationship had been. One of Savarkar's major criticisms of Gandhi and the Congress was that they had failed to prevent the partition of India. Then came the event that shook the country. On January 30th, 1948, Nathuram Vinayak Damodar assassinated Mahatma Gandhi. Because Godse and his co-accused Narayan Apte had visited Savarkar shortly before the assassination, the police arrested Savarkar on allegations of conspiracy. During the trial, an approver named Digumbar Baj testified that Savarkar had sent Godse away with his blessings. This testimony made the allegations against Savarkar even more serious. But the outcome in court was different. The court found that the prosecution evidence did not meet the standard required to establish a criminal conviction and therefore acquitted Savarkar. Godse, in his court statements, justified the assassination through his opposition to Gandhi's policies during partition and Gandhi's position regarding the transfer of money to Pakistan. Later, in 1966, the government appointed the Justice J.L. Kapoor Commission to investigate Savarkar's possible role. The commission submitted its report in 1969. After considering the available circumstantial evidence, the Kapoor Commission reached a strong conclusion that Savarkar and his group were connected with the conspiracy. However, this was not a criminal court judgment. The legal reality remained that Savarkar had been acquitted in the Gandhi assassination trial because the prosecution had failed to establish his guilt to the required criminal standard. Following Gandhi's assassination, the Hindu Mahasabha and other Hindu nationalist organizations, including the RSS, faced enormous political pressure and public suspicion. The assassination case and the political circumstances that followed had a profound effect on Savarkar's public image. Nevertheless, his ideas continued to be discussed within Hindu Mahasabha circles and other Hindu nationalist movements. During his final years, Savarkar spent much of his time at Savarkar Sadan in Mumbai. Convinced that his life's mission had been completed, he chose in 1966 to end his life through prayapavesha, a practice involving voluntary fasting until death. He died on February 26, 1966, after gradually giving up food and medicine. After his death, on May 28, 1970, the government of India issued a 20 postage stamp in his memory. Even today, Savarkar remains one of the most complex and controversial figures in Indian history. Those who support Savarkar regard him as an extraordinary national figure, emphasizing his revolutionary activities and social reforms. His critics, on the other hand, focus on his Mercy Petitions, majoritarian political theories, the Gandhi assassination controversy, and his political positions during the Second World War. At the center of his vision for India stood the idea of a Hindu Rashtra. Between these competing political interpretations, however, the most valuable historical approach is to examine Savarkar's original records and his own writings. His revolutionary years, imprisonment, development of Hindutva, Hindu Mahasabha politics, and social reform activities must all be considered together. Revolutionary nationalism, rationalism, social reform, Hindu nationalism, and militarization existed side by side within his life and political thought. Savarkar was therefore an extraordinarily complex historical figure whose strategies toward British rule changed at different stages and whose political philosophy combined nationalism with religious and cultural politics. We cannot simply place him into a category of complete virtue or complete wrongdoing, because history rarely conforms to such simple divisions. Whatever judgment one reaches about his politics, the influence of Savarkar's ideas and actions on the history of India cannot be ignored. The very name Savarkar can generate admiration in some people and intense opposition in others. The reason is simple. His life was filled with contradictions. Yet every major decision he made emerged from particular political circumstances. Only by understanding those circumstances can we understand Savarkar as a historical individual. It is easy to criticize him from the perspective of the present, but the intensity of the period in which he lived and the conditions he personally experienced should not be forgotten. Savarkar played a decisive role in transforming the concept of Hindutva into a political ideology. By presenting Hindu identity as something that extended beyond religion into the cultural and national sphere, he helped lay the intellectual foundation for several Hindu nationalist movements that emerged later. Perhaps his greatest political achievement was the transformation of his ideas into an influential school of political thought followed by a large community. Yet some of the practical political decisions he made in pursuit of that vision also contributed greatly to his controversial legacy. One example was the political cooperation between the Hindu Mahasabha under his leadership and the Muslim League. Despite his strong Hindu nationalist position, his willingness to enter political alliances based on circumstances attracted serious criticism. Even his supporters have found some of these decisions difficult to explain. For Savarkar, however, such political choices could be understood as steps toward a larger objective and as decisions made by a political leader operating within the realities of his time. Every chapter of Savarkar's life remains open to interpretation. Some argue that his actions were justified, while others believe they were fundamentally wrong. But one thing history has firmly established is that Vinayak Damodar Savarkar is a name that cannot simply be removed from the history of India's freedom struggle and political development. Whether the paths he chose were right or wrong is a question that history continues to debate. But the influence of his ideas cannot be ignored. The lines he composed during his imprisonment in the Cellular jail continue to inspire many people even today. Despite enduring suffering that few could imagine, he remained determined to survive and return to political activity. His objective was to leave prison and continue working for the ideas in which he believed. Many people, therefore, interpret his Mercy Petitions as part of that larger attempt to survive imprisonment and return to public life. Whatever interpretation one accepts, one fact is clear. Savarkar remains a figure around whom Indian politics rarely permits complete neutrality. Some revere him, while others strongly oppose him. His influence on Indian political thought has been significant enough to ensure that his ideas continue to shape political debates even today. In that sense, understanding Savarkar also means understanding an important part of India's political history and its continuing ideological debates. Gandhi and Savarkar eventually traveled along two very different ideological paths. Savarkar strongly criticized Gandhian nonviolent politics, believing that it weakened Hindu society in the face of violence. Yet, in one of history's striking contradictions, Gandhi himself had earlier appealed to the British for the release of the Savarkar brothers. This is one of the many paradoxes that make history so compelling. Two individuals who once supported the larger objective of India's independence eventually became ideological opposites. The darkest consequence of their political divergence came with Gandhi's assassination. Although Savarkar's personal involvement in the assassination was never legally established to the criminal standard required for conviction, the incident cast a lasting shadow over his life. He was never again able to play the same active political role he had once played. The Hindu Mahasabha and other Hindu nationalist organizations also became more distant from him in the aftermath. During his final years, he therefore remained somewhat removed from active politics. Yet he did not abandon the principles he had spent his life defending. Whether those principles were right or wrong remains a matter of political and historical judgment, but Savarkar pursued them with deep conviction. His atheism, Hindutva philosophy, and campaigns against caste discrimination all demonstrate different dimensions of that conviction. In the end, when he became convinced that his life's mission was complete, he chose to embrace death on his own terms. And so, in 1966, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar died. But the journey of his ideas did not end with his death. His thoughts on Hindutva nationalism, social reform, militarization, and the relationship between religion and rationalism continued to influence India's political and social debates. It is easy to examine Savarkar from only one side. One can remember him exclusively as a great revolutionary or dismiss his entire life because of his Mercy Petitions. But the responsibility of history goes beyond either approach. Understanding that apparently contradictory ideas and decisions could coexist within the life of a single individual is itself an essential part of studying history. That is why Savarkar must be examined through his own writings, letters, speeches, British records, court documents, testimonies of contemporaries, and later historical studies considered together. Was he a courageous revolutionary? Yes. There is historical evidence for his early revolutionary activities. Did he later use conciliatory language toward the British government? Yes. His Mercy Petitions clearly document that. Was he a major architect of Hindu nationalism? Certainly. Hindutva stands at the center of his political thought. Did he also work for social reform and rationalism? There are records documenting those efforts as well. Only when these different realities are examined together, without allowing one to erase another, can we develop a clearer understanding of Savarkar as a historical figure. Admiring or opposing him may be a personal political position, but denying his historical influence is far more difficult. Studying Savarkar is therefore not simply the study of one individual. It is also the study of the complicated relationship between nationalism, religion, politics, social reform, and the struggle over India's identity in the modern era. The purpose of this journey is neither to glorify Savarkar nor to condemn him, but to understand the contradictions of his life through the available records and evidence. The evidence is before you. The contradictions are part of the story, and the final judgment is yours.